Stop resisting. Those two words cut through the sterile hospital air like a blade through flesh. Officer Grant Hollis didn't shout them. He hissed them, low and venomous, his hand already gripping the wrist of a woman who hadn't moved an inch. It was 9:43 p.m. on a sweltering Tuesday in August, inside the emergency room of Mercy General Hospital in downtown Atlanta. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that sickly white glow hospitals always have. And in the center of it all stood Naomi Fletcher, 34 years old, dressed in navy blue scrubs with her hospital ID clipped to her chest, stethoscope draped around her neck. She wasn't resisting. She was working. But to Officer Grant Hollis, that didn't matter. Before we go any further, let me ask you something. Have you ever been accused of something you didn't do by someone who had all the power and none of the truth? If this story resonates with you, subscribe and share it. Because what happens in the next few minutes isn't just about one officer and one nurse. It's about a system that protects the wrong people and punishes the right ones. And it's about the moment that system finally broke. Naomi had been on shift for 11 hours. Her feet ached. Her back was tight. But her hands were steady as she checked the IV drip on a patient in Bay 4, an elderly black man named Trevon Hughes who'd come in with chest pains an hour earlier. She adjusted the flow, made a note on his chart, and smiled at him gently. "You're doing fine, Mr. Hughes. Just breathe easy. We've got you." Trevon nodded, his eyes tired but grateful. "You're a good nurse," he said softly. Naomi didn't get to respond, because that's when Officer Grant Hollis walked in. He was 41 years old, white, with a thick neck and a thicker ego. His uniform was tight across his chest, his badge polished to a shine. He walked like he owned the room, like every room. His partner, Officer Kyle Bradford, trailed behind him, younger, quieter, uncertain. They'd been called to the hospital for a domestic disturbance report. A man had allegedly assaulted his girlfriend in the parking lot, and security had detained him in the waiting area. Standard procedure. Hollis and Bradford were there to take a statement and make an arrest if needed. But Hollis didn't go to the waiting area. He went to Bay 4. He walked right past the nurse's station, ignored the signs, and pushed through the curtain where Naomi was still standing beside Trevon's bed. Naomi turned, startled. "Excuse me, this is a patient care area. You need to check in at the desk first." Hollis didn't even look at her. He looked at Trevon. "You Trevon Hughes?" Trevon blinked, confused. "Yes, sir, but I—" Hollis cut him off. "We got a report you were involved in an altercation in the parking lot." Naomi stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Officer, there's been a mistake. Mr. Hughes has been here for over an hour. He came in by ambulance. He couldn't have been in any altercation." Hollis finally looked at her, and his eyes were cold. "Who are you?" "I'm his nurse, Naomi Fletcher, and I'm telling you, he's been under my care since he arrived. You've got the wrong person." Hollis didn't blink. "I'll decide who's wrong." He moved closer to the bed. Trevon tried to sit up, but the IV line tugged at his arm. "Officer, I don't know what you're talking about. I've been here the whole time." Hollis ignored him. He turned back to Naomi. "Step aside." Naomi didn't move. She planted her feet. "I can't let you question a patient who's in active treatment. If you need to verify his identity, I can page the charge nurse or the attending physician. But you need to follow hospital protocol." For a moment, the room was silent. The machines beeped. The air conditioner rattled, and Hollis stared at Naomi like she'd just spat in his face. Then he smiled. Not a friendly smile, a predator's smile. "You telling me how to do my job?" "I'm telling you how this hospital works." Hollis took a step closer. His voice dropped. "You got a problem with law enforcement?" Naomi's heart was pounding, but her voice stayed steady. "I have a problem with anyone who disrupts patient care. Now please step outside and I'll get the charge nurse." Hollis didn't step outside. He stepped forward. And before Naomi could react, before she could even process what was happening, he grabbed her by the wrist and yanked her toward him. "I said step aside." Naomi gasped, more from shock than pain. She tried to pull her arm back. "Officer, let go of me." Hollis tightened his grip. "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting. Let go of my arm." But he didn't let go. He twisted her wrist hard and shoved her backward. Naomi stumbled, her shoulder slamming into the metal IV pole. It rattled loudly, the sound echoing through the bay. Trevin shouted from the bed, "Hey, she didn't do anything." Hollis spun on him. "Shut your mouth or you're next." That's when LaToya Barnes appeared. She was another nurse, 29 years old, black, sharp-eyed, and quick-tongued. She'd heard the commotion from the hallway and came running. "What the hell is going on in here?" Hollis didn't answer. He turned back to Naomi, who was now pressed against the wall, her wrist still in his grip. LaToya stepped between them. "Officer, let her go, right now." Hollis looked at her like she was an insect. "You want to get arrested too?" "For what, doing my job?" "For obstruction." LaToya's eyes narrowed. "You're obstructing patient care, and if you don't let her go, I'm calling hospital security and your supervisor." Hollis laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Go ahead." And then he did something that changed everything. He pulled Naomi forward, spun her around, and slammed her face first into the wall. The impact was brutal. Naomi's cheek hit the concrete with a sickening thud. Her vision blurred, her knees buckled, and before she could even cry out, Hollis had her arm wrenched behind her back, his knee pressed into her spine. LaToya screamed, "Stop! You're hurting her!" Hollis barked over his shoulder, "Bradford, control this area!" Officer Kyle Bradford, who had been standing frozen in the doorway, finally moved, but he didn't move to help Naomi. He moved to block LaToya. "Ma'am, step back." LaToya shoved past him. "Get your hands off her. She didn't do anything." But Hollis wasn't listening. He pulled Naomi's other arm behind her back and clicked handcuffs around her wrists. The metal bit into her skin. Her face was still pressed against the wall, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. "You're under arrest for assaulting an officer and obstruction of justice." Naomi's voice came out choked, barely audible. "I didn't assault anyone." Hollis yanked her upright, spinning her around so fast her head snapped back. Her eyes were wide, her cheek already swelling where it had hit the wall. Blood trickled from a small cut near her eyebrow. And that's when the room exploded. LaToya lunged forward, screaming, "You just assaulted a nurse in front of witnesses. I'm calling the police." Hollis sneered. "I am the police." Trevin was trying to get out of bed, his IV line tangling. "Stop this. She didn't do nothing." Bradford moved to restrain him. "Sir, stay in the bed." But Trevin wasn't staying anywhere. He ripped the IV out of his arm, blood streaming down his forearm, and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Somebody help! They're beating on the nurse!" And that's when the ER doors burst open. Dr. Rebecca Stein, the attending physician, stormed in. She was white, 50 years old, with silver hair pulled into a tight bun and a reputation for taking exactly zero nonsense from anyone. "What in God's name is happening in my ER?" Hollis turned, still gripping Naomi by the cuffs. "This woman assaulted me. I'm taking her into custody." Dr. Stein looked at Naomi's swollen face, the blood on her cheek, the way her body was trembling. Then she looked at Hollis. "That woman is a registered nurse with a spotless record, and unless you have video evidence of her assaulting you, you're about to have a very bad day." Hollis's jaw tightened. "I don't need video. I have my testimony." Dr. Stein stepped closer. Her voice was ice. "And I have 12 witnesses, 3 cameras, and a hospital full of lawyers. So unless you want to spend the next year in a courtroom explaining why you brutalized a healthcare worker, I suggest you uncuff her. Now." For a moment, Hollis hesitated. His grip on Naomi loosened slightly, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. "She interfered with an investigation." "There was no investigation. You walked into the wrong room, harassed the wrong patient, and assaulted the wrong nurse. Now let her go before I have you removed from this hospital." Hollis's face turned red. "You threatening me?" Dr. Stein didn't blink. "I'm protecting my staff, something you clearly don't understand." The tension was suffocating. LaToya was on her phone, already dialing hospital security. Trevon was still shouting from his bed, and Naomi, hands cuffed behind her back, face bruised and bleeding, stood perfectly still. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stared at Hollis with a look that said one thing clearly: "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." And then, from somewhere deep in the hallway, a voice rang out, deep, steady, furious. "Where is she?" Everyone froze. Footsteps echoed, heavy, deliberate. getting closer, and then he appeared. Isaiah Fletcher, Naomi's brother. He was 38 years old, 6'3", built like a linebacker, with shoulders that filled the doorway. He wore a dark jacket over a white t-shirt, jeans, and boots. His face was carved from stone, his eyes locked onto Hollis like a heat-seeking missile. And when he spoke, his voice was quiet, too quiet. "Get your hands off my sister." Hollis turned, and for the first time since he walked into that ER, he looked uncertain. Isaiah took one step forward, then another, and the entire room held its breath. Isaiah Fletcher didn't run. He didn't shout. He walked into Bay 4 like a man who'd seen this before and knew exactly how it would end. His eyes swept the room in seconds. Naomi, cuffed, bleeding. Hollis, hands still on her. Bradford, standing uselessly to the side. Dr. Stein, furious. Latoya, phone in hand. Trevon, out of bed, blood dripping from his arm. And Isaiah's jaw clenched so tight you could hear his teeth grind. "I said, get your hands off her." Hollis turned fully now, puffing his chest. "And who the hell are you?" Isaiah didn't answer right away. He took another step forward, closing the distance between them until he was less than 3 feet from Hollis. He was taller, broader, and infinitely calmer. "I'm her brother, and if you don't uncuff her in the next 5 seconds, you're going to wish you had." Hollis's hand went to his belt, hovering near his taser. "You threatening a police officer?" Isaiah's voice didn't rise. It dropped. "I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing before you lose everything." Hollis scoffed. "Big talk for someone about to get arrested for interference." Dr. Stein stepped forward. "Officer, this man hasn't interfered with anything, but you have. And if you don't release Nurse Fletcher immediately, I will personally file a complaint with your precinct, the hospital board, and every media outlet in this city." Latoya held up her phone. "And I've got the whole thing on video. From the moment you grabbed her." Hollis's face went pale. "You're bluffing." Latoya turned the phone around. The red recording light glowed. "Try me." Bradford shifted uncomfortably. "Hollis, maybe we should—" Hollis cut him off. "Shut up, Bradford." But the room was closing in on him now. Dr. Stein, Latoya, Trevon, and Isaiah, standing there like a wall of consequences. Isaiah spoke again, his tone almost gentle. "You walked into the wrong room. You grabbed the wrong person, and now you've got a choice. Uncuff her, apologize, and walk out, or double down and lose your badge." Hollis's hand was still on his taser. "I'm not apologizing to anyone." Isaiah nodded slowly. "Then you just made your choice." He pulled out his phone. Hollis tensed, but Isaiah didn't film. He dialed, and when the other end picked up, he said calmly, "This is Captain Isaiah Fletcher, U.S. Army, stationed at Fort Benning. I need to speak to Chief Garrett." "Now." Hollis froze. Isaiah waited, eyes never leaving Hollis's face. Then a voice came through the speaker, gruff and impatient. "This is Chief Garrett. Who am I speaking to?" Isaiah's voice was calm, professional. "Chief, this is Captain Isaiah Fletcher. I'm currently standing in the ER at Mercy General. One of your officers, Grant Hollis, just assaulted my sister, a registered nurse, in front of multiple witnesses. She's handcuffed, bleeding, and he's refusing to release her." There was a pause, then, "Put him on." Isaiah held the phone out. Hollis stared at it like it was a grenade. "Your boss wants to talk to you." Hollis's hand trembled as he took the phone. He pressed it to his ear. "Chief, The voice on the other end exploded. "I don't want to hear it, Hollis. Uncuff that woman right now and get back to the station. We'll talk there." Hollis's face went red. "Chief, she interfered with—" Did I stutter? "Uncuff her, now." The line went dead. Hollis stood there, phone in hand, staring at nothing. The room was silent except for the beeping monitors and Trevon's labored breathing. Then, slowly, Hollis reached for his belt and pulled out the key to the handcuffs. He stepped behind Naomi, who hadn't said a word this entire time. Her face was swollen, her wrists raw where the metal had bitten into her skin, and when the cuffs finally clicked open, she didn't collapse. She didn't sob. She turned around and looked Hollis dead in the eye. "You're done." Hollis didn't respond. He shoved past Isaiah and stormed out of the bay, Bradford trailing behind him like a guilty shadow. The moment they were gone, Latoya rushed to Naomi's side. "Oh my God, are you okay?" Naomi winced as Latoya touched her cheek. "I'll be fine." Dr. Stein was already examining her. "You're not fine. You've got a contusion, possible fracture. We're getting you x-rays and filing an incident report immediately." But Naomi wasn't looking at Dr. Stein. She was looking at Isaiah. And for the first time since this nightmare started, her eyes filled with tears. Isaiah stepped forward and pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest, her body finally allowing itself to shake. "I got you," he whispered. "I got you." Behind them, Trevon was being helped back into bed by Latoya, his arm being bandaged. He looked at Isaiah with something like awe. "Man, who are you?" Isaiah didn't let go of Naomi. "I'm her big brother, and I just ended that cop's career." Dr. Stein nodded grimly. "Good, because what just happened here was assault, abuse of power, and a violation of every hospital policy we have." Latoya was still filming, her hands shaking. "I got everything. From the moment he grabbed her to the moment he cuffed her. This is going viral." Naomi pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. "No, don't post it yet." Latoya blinked. "What? Why?" "Because I want to do this the right way. I want a formal complaint. I want an investigation. And I want him held accountable in a courtroom, not just on social media." Isaiah squeezed her shoulder. "That's my sister." Dr. Stein smiled faintly. "Then let's make it official." And as the hospital staff began documenting everything, as Latoya saved the video, as Trevon gave his witness statement, Naomi sat down on the edge of a chair and took a deep, shuddering breath. She'd been assaulted, humiliated, handcuffed in her own workplace, but she was still standing. And Officer Grant Hollis was about to learn that the woman he'd brutalized wasn't just a nurse. She was a Fletcher, and the Fletchers didn't back down. The incident report took 2 hours to complete. Naomi sat in a private examination room while Dr. Stein treated her injuries. The cut above her eyebrow required 3 stitches. Her left cheek was swollen and already turning purple. Her wrists had deep red marks from the handcuffs. But it was the look in her eyes that told the real story. Not fear, not pain, determination. Isaiah sat beside her the entire time, jaw tight, hands clenched into fists that never relaxed. Latoya stood by the door, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. And Dr. Stein worked with the kind of quiet fury that comes from watching someone you respect get brutalized. "I'm recommending you take the rest of the week off," Dr. Stein said as she finished bandaging Naomi's wrists. Naomi shook her head. "I'm working tomorrow." Dr. Stein paused. "Naomi, you've been through a trauma. You need time to—" "I need to work. I need to be here. Because if I don't come back tomorrow, it means he won." Isaiah put a hand on her shoulder. "Nobody's saying he won, Nay. But you don't have to prove anything." "I'm not proving anything. I'm doing my job just like I was doing tonight before he put his hands on me." The room went quiet. Dr. Stein sighed, then nodded. "All right. But if you feel dizzy, nauseous, or if your vision blurs at all, you page me immediately. Understood?" "Understood." Dr. Stein stood gathering her supplies. "I've already contacted hospital administration. They're filing a formal complaint with the police department and the city attorney's office. And I've sent your medical report directly to both." Latoya spoke up from the doorway. "And I've sent the video to a lawyer friend of mine. She specializes in police misconduct cases. She wants to talk to you." Naomi looked at her. "What's her name?" "Simone Grant. She's good, Nay, really good." Isaiah pulled out his phone. "I'll reach out to some people at Benning, too. We've got legal resources for situations like this. You're not fighting this alone." Naomi's eyes welled up again, but she blinked the tears back. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't shown up." Isaiah's voice was quiet but firm. "You would have handled it. You always do. But I'm your brother. I'm always going to show up." Dr. Stein placed a hand on Naomi's shoulder. "You did nothing wrong tonight, and I will testify to that anywhere, anytime. What he did was criminal." There was a soft knock on the door. A woman in a gray suit stepped in, her expression professional but kind. She was white, mid-50s, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Naomi Fletcher?" Naomi nodded. I'm Helen Marsh, Hospital Security Supervisor. I've been reviewing the footage from our hallway cameras, and I need to inform you that what happened tonight is being treated as a code red incident. That means full cooperation with law enforcement, full internal review, and full support for you as the victim. Victim, the word hung in the air. Naomi took a breath. What does that mean exactly? It means the hospital is on your side. We're not brushing this under the rug. Officer Hollis will be banned from this facility pending the investigation, and we're forwarding everything to the district attorney's office. LaToya crossed her arms. What about his partner? Bradford just stood there and watched. Helen nodded. He's also banned, and we're recommending disciplinary action through his chain of command. Isaiah leaned forward. What's the timeline on this? Helen met his gaze. The DA's office will likely file charges within 48 hours. Assault, battery, false arrest, abuse of authority. Those are the charges we're recommending. But it depends on what they decide to pursue. Naomi's voice was steady. I want all of it. I want every charge filed. I want him prosecuted. Helen nodded. Then that's what we'll push for. She handed Naomi a folder. This is a copy of everything we've compiled so far. Witness statements, medical reports, video footage. Keep it somewhere safe. Naomi took the folder, her hands trembling slightly. Thank you. Helen's expression softened. You shouldn't have to thank me for doing the right thing, but you're welcome. After Helen left, the room fell into silence again. Naomi stared at the folder in her lap, the weight of it somehow heavier than it should be. Isaiah broke the silence. Tell me what happened before I got there. Start from the beginning. And so Naomi did. She walked him through every moment. The way Hollis stormed into Bay 4, the way he ignored her when she tried to explain, the way he grabbed her wrist, the way he slammed her into the wall. Isaiah's hands clenched tighter with every word. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, he put his hands on you because he thought he could, because he's done it before and gotten away with it. LaToya nodded. That's exactly what this is. He saw a black woman and thought she wouldn't fight back. Naomi looked at her brother. But I am fighting back. Isaiah smiled faintly. Damn right you are. Dr. Stein stood. I need to get back to the floor. But Naomi, if you need anything at all, you call me. Day or night. Naomi nodded. Thank you, Dr. Stein. After she left, LaToya sat down beside Naomi. Girl, I'm so sorry I didn't get there faster. Naomi shook her head. You got there. That's what matters. And you got it on video. That's everything. LaToya squeezed her hand. We're gonna bury him. Isaiah stood. I need to make some calls, but I'm not leaving this hospital until you do. Naomi looked up at him. You don't have to. Yes, I do. I'm your brother. This is what I do. And as Isaiah stepped out into the hallway to make his calls, as LaToya sat beside Naomi in solidarity, as the hospital buzzed with whispers and shock, one thing became very clear. Officer Grant Hollis had picked the wrong nurse, and he was about to find out just how wrong. By midnight, the story had already started to spread. Not online, not yet, but through the hospital. Nurses whispered at the station. Doctors exchanged glances in the break room. Security staff replayed the footage over and over, their faces grim. Everyone knew what had happened, and everyone was furious. Naomi finally left the examination room just after 1 a.m. Isaiah walked beside her, his presence like a shield. LaToya was on her other side, still clutching her phone. As they passed through the ER, other staff members stopped what they were doing. A young nurse named Brielle, fresh out of school, stepped forward. Naomi, I'm so sorry. Are you okay? Naomi managed a small smile. I will be. An older doctor, a man in his 60s who'd worked at Mercy General for decades, approached. His voice was rough with emotion. What happened to you tonight is unacceptable. We're all behind you. Naomi's throat tightened. Thank you, Dr. Lawson. He nodded. And if they ask me to testify, I'll be first in line. One by one, staff members came up, offering support, offering to be witnesses, offering to fight. And Naomi realized something. She wasn't alone. When they finally reached the parking lot, Isaiah walked her to her car. He opened the door for her, then leaned against it. You sure you're okay to drive? I'm sure. He studied her face. You know you can stay at my place tonight. Angela won't mind. Naomi shook her head. I need my own bed. I need to be home. All right, but I'm following you, and I'm checking every room before I leave. Naomi smiled, despite everything. You're still my overprotective big brother. Always. The drive home was quiet. Naomi's hands gripped the steering wheel, her mind replaying the night over and over. The way Hollis had looked at her, the way he'd grabbed her, the way her face had hit the wall, but also the way Isaiah had shown up, the way Dr. Stein had stood up for her, the way LaToya had recorded everything. She pulled into her apartment complex, a modest building in a quiet neighborhood. Isaiah parked behind her and walked her to her door. Inside, he checked the closets, the bathroom under the bed. Naomi watched, her heart full. You're clear, he said finally. Thank you, Isaiah. He pulled her into a hug. Get some sleep. I'll call you in the morning. After he left, Naomi locked the door, turned on every light, and sat down on her couch. The folder Helen had given her sat on the coffee table. She opened it slowly. Inside were copies of witness statements, LaToya's, Dr. Stein's, Trevon's, even a statement from a janitor who'd been in the hallway. Then there were the photos, medical photos of her injuries, her swollen cheek, her bruised wrists, the stitches above her eye. And finally, stills from the security footage. Hollis grabbing her, Hollis slamming her into the wall, Hollis cuffing her while she stood there defenseless. Naomi stared at those images for a long time. Then she closed the folder, picked up her phone, and called the lawyer LaToya had mentioned. The phone rang twice before a voice answered. Professional, calm. This is Simone Grant. Ms. Grant, this is Naomi Fletcher. LaToya Barnes gave me your number. There was a pause. Then, I've been waiting for your call. Tell me everything. And Naomi did. She walked through the entire night, her voice steady, her details precise. Simone listened without interrupting, only asking clarifying questions. When Naomi finished, Simone said, Here's what's going to happen. I'm filing a civil suit against Officer Hollis, Officer Bradford, and the police department tomorrow morning. We're going after assault, battery, false arrest, emotional distress, and violation of civil rights. Naomi took a breath. What are the chances we win? With the video footage, the witness statements, and the medical evidence? I'd say we're looking at a settlement before it even goes to trial. But if they want to fight, we'll bury them in court. Naomi smiled faintly. Good. One more thing, Simone said. I want you to be prepared for what's coming. They're going to try to discredit you. They're going to dig into your past, your work history, your personal life. They're going to try to make you look like the aggressor. Let them try. Simone's voice warmed. I like you, Naomi. We're going to win this. After they hung up, Naomi sat in the silence of her apartment. Her face throbbed. Her wrists ached. But for the first time since Hollis had grabbed her, she felt something other than anger and fear. She felt hope. And as she finally climbed into bed, her phone buzzed with a text from Isaiah. You good? She typed back. I'm good. Just talked to the lawyer. We're moving forward. His response was immediate. That's my sister. Get some rest. Tomorrow we fight. Naomi turned off the lights, pulled the covers up, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, Officer Grant Hollis would wake up thinking he'd gotten away with it. But Naomi Fletcher was about to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. Officer Grant Hollis didn't sleep well that night. He'd gone home to his one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, poured himself a bourbon, and sat in his recliner staring at nothing. He told himself he'd done nothing wrong. The nurse had interfered. She'd gotten in his face. He'd restrained her because she was being aggressive. That's what he'd tell internal affairs. That's what he'd tell the chief. That's what he'd tell himself. But deep down, in a place he didn't like to visit, he knew the truth. He'd lost his temper. He'd grabbed a woman who hadn't touched him. He'd slammed her into a wall because she'd challenged his authority. And now there was video. His phone buzzed, a text from Bradford. IA wants to see us both tomorrow at 800. Hollis threw his phone across the room. The next morning, Naomi woke up to a swollen face and a message from Simone Grant. The lawsuit had been filed. The local news had picked up the story. And the police department had issued a statement. Officer Grant Hollis and Officer Kyle Bradford have been placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into an incident at Mercy General Hospital. The department takes all allegations of misconduct seriously and is cooperating fully with hospital administration. Naomi read it twice, then showed it to Isaiah when he came by with coffee and breakfast. Administrative leave, that's it? For now, Isaiah said. But that's just the beginning. By noon, the story had exploded. LaToya had sent the video to a local news station and they'd run with it. Within hours, it was everywhere. Social media, national news. Every outlet was covering it. Nurse assaulted by officer in hospital. Black nurse handcuffed while treating patient. Video shows officer slamming nurse into wall. Naomi's phone wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, activists, supporters. She ignored most of them, but one call came through that she answered. It was from a woman named Simone Grant. "Naomi, we need to talk. The DA's office just called. They're filing criminal charges against Hollis, assault and battery, false arrest, abuse of authority." Naomi's breath caught. "Already?" The video did all the talking. They can't ignore this. It's too public now. "What about Bradford?" "He's being charged as an accessory. He didn't stop it, which makes him complicit." Naomi leaned against her kitchen counter. "This is really happening." "It is. And we're not stopping until they're both convicted." That evening, Naomi returned to work. She'd told Dr. Stein she would, and she meant it. When she walked through the ER doors in her scrubs, the entire staff stopped and applauded. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. She waved them off, but they wouldn't stop. LaToya ran up and hugged her. "Girl, you're a hero." "I'm not a hero. I'm just a nurse who got assaulted." "And you fought back. That makes you a hero." Dr. Stein approached, her expression stern but proud. "Welcome back, Naomi. Bay 4 is ready when you are." Naomi nodded, took a deep breath, and walked back into the place where she'd been assaulted less than 24 hours ago. But this time she wasn't alone. This time she had an army behind her. And Officer Grant Hollis was about to learn that some battles you can't win. The internal affairs interview took place in a windowless room at police headquarters. Officer Grant Hollis sat on one side of the table, his union lawyer beside him. Across from them sat Lieutenant Karen Ross, head of internal affairs, and Detective Marcus Webb, a 20-year veteran with a reputation for not tolerating dirty cops. Lieutenant Ross opened the file in front of her. "Officer Hollis, you've been placed on administrative leave following an incident at Mercy General Hospital on the night of August 15th. Are you aware of why you're here?" Hollis leaned back in his chair. "I'm aware." Ross slid a photo across the table. It was a still from the security footage, showing Hollis with his hand wrapped around Naomi's wrist. "Can you explain what's happening in this image?" Hollis barely glanced at it. "I was attempting to remove a hostile individual from a patient care area." Detective Webb leaned forward. "A hostile individual? That's Naomi Fletcher, a registered nurse with 12 years of experience and 0 disciplinary actions on her record." Hollis shrugged. "I didn't know that at the time." Ross slid another photo across. This one showed Naomi pressed against the wall, Hollis's knee in her back. "And this?" "She was resisting arrest." Webb's jaw tightened. "For what crime?" "Obstruction of justice, interference with a police investigation." Ross pulled out a document. "According to hospital records, the patient you were questioning, Trevon Hughes, had been in the ER for over an hour before you arrived. He couldn't have been involved in the parking lot altercation you were investigating." Hollis's lawyer cleared his throat. "My client was acting on the information available to him at the time." Webb cut in. "Your client assaulted a healthcare worker. There's video evidence, multiple witnesses, and now she's in the hospital with documented injuries." Hollis's face reddened. "She got in my face. She refused to comply with a lawful order." Ross's voice was ice cold. "You grabbed her first, Officer Hollis. The video is very clear about that. She didn't touch you. She didn't threaten you. She asked you to follow hospital protocol, and you responded with violence." The room went silent. Hollis stared at the table, his jaw working. Webb slid a final photo across. It was a close-up of Naomi's face, swollen and bruised, the stitches visible above her eye. "This is what you did. To a woman who was doing her job. To a nurse who was protecting her patient." Hollis's voice came out strangled. "I was doing my job." "No," Ross said quietly. "You were abusing your power, and now you're going to face the consequences." The interview lasted another hour. Hollis stuck to his story, insisting that Naomi had been aggressive, that he'd felt threatened, that he'd had no choice but to restrain her. But the evidence told a different story. The video showed a calm woman asking questions, a hostile officer grabbing her without provocation, a violent takedown that left her injured and handcuffed. When it was over, Ross stood and closed her file. "Officer Hollis, based on the evidence we've reviewed, I'm recommending you be terminated from the police department. Additionally, the district attorney has informed us that criminal charges are being filed against you. You'll be arraigned next week." Hollis shot to his feet. "This is garbage. You're throwing me under the bus because of one mistake." Webb stood as well, his voice hard. "One mistake? We pulled your file, Hollis. In the last 5 years, you've had 14 complaints filed against you. Excessive force, racial profiling, verbal abuse. You've been skating by because nobody wanted to be the one to take you down. But that ends today." Hollis's lawyer tried to intervene. "My client has rights, and so did Naomi Fletcher," Ross snapped. "But your client violated every single one of them." The room fell silent. Hollis stood there, his face red, his hands shaking. Then he turned and stormed out, his lawyer scrambling to follow. After they left, Webb looked at Ross. "Think he'll plead out?" Ross shook her head. "His ego won't let him. He'll take it to trial." "Good," Webb said, "because I want to see him burn." Meanwhile, across town, Naomi was finishing her shift. She'd treated 6 patients, assisted with 2 trauma cases, and managed to keep her composure even when a drunk man had yelled at her for making him wait. But when her shift ended and she walked to her car, the weight of everything finally hit her. She sat in the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, and let the tears come. Not because she was weak, but because she was human. Her phone buzzed, a text from Isaiah. "How was today?" She typed back, "Hard, but I made it. That's all that matters. Proud of you." Naomi wiped her eyes, started the car, and drove home. When she got there, she found a package on her doorstep. Inside was a card from the nursing staff at Mercy General. It was signed by over 50 people, all offering their support and solidarity. And at the bottom, in Dr. Stein's handwriting, was a simple message. "You are not alone, and you will never be alone. We stand with you." Naomi pressed the card to her chest and cried again, but this time they were tears of gratitude. The next day, Officer Kyle Bradford broke. He'd been in his own internal affairs interview, and unlike Hollis, he didn't have the stomach to lie. When they showed him the video, when they asked him why he didn't intervene, he cracked. "I knew it was wrong. I knew Hollis was out of line, but I didn't stop him because I was scared." Ross looked at him coldly. "Scared of what? Of going against him, of being labeled a rat, of losing my job. So instead, you let him assault a woman. You stood there and did nothing while a nurse was brutalized." Bradford's voice broke. "I know, and I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't undo what happened. Sorry doesn't heal her injuries. Sorry doesn't give her back the dignity you helped take away." Bradford buried his face in his hands. "What do I do?" Webb leaned forward. "You testify. You tell the truth. You make this right the only way you can." And that's exactly what Bradford did. He agreed to testify against Hollis in exchange for reduced charges. He gave a full statement detailing everything he'd witnessed, and he admitted that Hollis had a pattern of targeting people of color. When Simone Grant heard about Bradford's cooperation, she called Naomi immediately. "We just got a gift. Bradford's flipping on Hollis." "What does that mean?" "It means we have an inside witness, someone who was there, who saw everything, and who's willing to testify that Hollis was the aggressor. This case just went from strong to airtight." Naomi sat down, her legs suddenly weak. "So we're really going to win this." "We're not just going to win, we're going to make history." 2 weeks later, Officer Grant Hollis was arraigned on 3 counts of assault, 1 count of battery, 1 count of false arrest, and 1 count of abuse of authority under color of law. He pleaded not guilty. The trial was set for 6 weeks later, and in that time, the story continued to grow. National civil rights organizations got involved. Activists held rallies outside the courthouse, and Naomi Fletcher became the face of a movement she'd never asked to lead. But she stood tall, she gave interviews, she told her story, and she made it clear that this wasn't just about her. This is about every nurse, every healthcare worker, every person who's been abused by someone who thought their badge gave them the right to hurt people. I'm fighting for all of us. And as the trial date approached, one thing became crystal clear. Officer Grant Hollis had walked into that ER thinking he was untouchable, but Naomi Fletcher was about to prove him wrong. The courthouse was packed on the first day of the trial. Reporters filled the benches. Activists held signs outside the building, their chants echoing through the streets. Naomi walked in wearing a navy blue suit, her hair pulled back, her face calm but determined. Isaiah walked beside her, his towering presence like a bodyguard. Latoya followed close behind, phone in hand, ready to document everything. Inside the courtroom, Officer Grant Hollis sat at the defense table, his lawyer whispering in his ear. He looked smaller than he had in the hospital. The confidence was gone, replaced with a tight, nervous energy. The prosecution opened with the video. The footage played on a large screen for the jury to see. Hollis grabbing Naomi's wrist, Hollis slamming her into the wall, Hollis cuffing her while she stood helpless. The room was silent as the images played. Silent except for the sound of Naomi's body hitting the wall, a sickening thud that made several jurors flinch. When the video ended, the prosecutor, a sharp-eyed black woman named Dana Mitchell, turned to the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, what you just witnessed was not law enforcement. It was brutality. It was abuse of power, and it was a crime." The defense tried to argue that Hollis had been acting within his authority, that Naomi had been aggressive, that the video didn't show the full story. But then came the witnesses. Latoya Barnes took the stand first. She described what she saw, her voice steady, her words precise. "I watched him grab her. I watched him slam her into the wall. I watched him handcuff her for doing nothing but her job." The defense tried to rattle her, asking if she had a personal bias against police. Latoya shot back without hesitation. "I have a bias against people who abuse their power. If that makes me biased, so be it." The jury leaned forward, listening closely. Then Trevon Hughes testified. His arm still bore a faint scar where the IV had been ripped out that night. "I was lying in that bed when it happened. She wasn't resisting. She wasn't aggressive. She was protecting me, and that cop treated her like a criminal." The defense tried to discredit him, bringing up his past arrests. But Trevon looked the jury in the eye and said, "I may not be perfect, but I know what I saw. And what I saw was wrong." Next came Dr. Rebecca Stein. The courtroom went still as she took the stand. Her reputation preceded her. She was respected, authoritative, unshakable. "I've worked in emergency medicine for 25 years. I've seen patients die. I've seen violence. But I have never, in my career, seen an officer assault a nurse in my ER until that night." The defense lawyer asked if Naomi could have been obstructing care. Dr. Stein's eyes flashed. "Naomi Fletcher is one of the finest nurses I've ever worked with. She was doing her job. He was abusing his badge. That's the truth." Finally, Officer Kyle Bradford testified. His voice shook, but his words carried weight. "I was there. I saw everything. Naomi Fletcher didn't resist. She didn't assault anyone. Hollis was the aggressor, and I didn't stop him. I should have. That's on me." The courtroom gasped. Hollis turned red, his jaw tight, but the damage was done. His own partner had just condemned him. Naomi herself took the stand last. She spoke calmly, clearly, recounting every moment. "I was caring for a patient. I asked Officer Hollis to follow hospital protocol. He ignored me. He grabbed me. He slammed me into a wall. He handcuffed me while I was bleeding and disoriented. I did nothing wrong. I was just doing my job." When the prosecutor asked what she wanted from the trial, Naomi's voice didn't waver. "I want accountability. I want to make sure this never happens to another nurse, another black woman, another human being, ever again." Her words hung in the air long after she stepped down from the stand. And as the trial moved forward, one thing became undeniable. The jury believed her. 4 weeks later, the courtroom was packed again, this time for sentencing. Naomi sat in the front row, flanked by Isaiah and Simone. Behind her, the gallery was filled with nurses from Mercy General, civil rights activists, and community members who'd followed the case from the beginning. Officer Grant Hollis sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists shackled. He looked thinner, older. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something hollow. Judge Hayes entered and everyone stood. "Be seated. We're here for the sentencing of Grant Hollis, convicted on 4 counts related to the assault of Naomi Fletcher." She looked at Hollis. "Mr. Hollis, you've been convicted by a jury of your peers of assault, battery, false arrest, and abuse of authority. Before I impose sentence, I'm going to allow the victim to make a statement. Ms. Fletcher?" Naomi stood. Her legs felt weak, but her voice was strong. She walked to the podium and faced Hollis directly. "When you grabbed me that night, you didn't just hurt my body. You tried to take my dignity. You tried to make me feel small, powerless, like I didn't matter. But you failed." Her voice grew stronger. "Because I do matter. Every nurse matters. Every person who walks into a hospital deserves to be treated with respect. And every officer who abuses their power deserves exactly what you're getting today." She paused, letting the words sink in. "I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice. And I hope that when you sit in your cell, you think about what you did. I hope you think about the fact that I was just doing my job, just like you claimed to be doing yours." Naomi took a breath. "But the difference is, my job is about helping people, and yours became about hurting them." She turned to Judge Hayes. "Thank you, Your Honor." The courtroom was silent as Naomi returned to her seat. Isaiah reached over and squeezed her hand. Judge Hayes looked at Hollis. "Mr. Hollis, do you have anything to say before I impose sentence?" Hollis's lawyer stood. "Your Honor, my client would like to address the court." Hollis stood slowly. His voice was rough, barely audible. I made a mistake." Judge Hayes's expression didn't change. "A mistake is forgetting to file paperwork, Mr. Hollis. What you did was a crime." Hollis swallowed hard. "I was under stress. I reacted poorly." "You brutalized a healthcare worker," Judge Hayes said, her voice cold. "You slammed her into a wall. You handcuffed her while she was bleeding. And according to the evidence presented at trial, this wasn't the first time you've abused your authority." She opened a file. "I've reviewed your personnel record, Mr. Hollis. 14 complaints in 5 years, all of them involving people of color, all of them dismissed or downplayed. You had chance after chance to change your behavior, and you didn't." Hollis said nothing. His lawyer put a hand on his shoulder, but Hollis shrugged it off. Judge Hayes continued. "You were given a badge and a gun and the trust of this community, and you betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. You used your authority not to protect and serve, but to intimidate and harm." She closed the file. "Grant Hollis, I hereby sentence you to 6 years in state prison on the assault charge, to run consecutively with 3 years on the battery charge, 2 years on the false arrest charge, and 2 years on the abuse of authority charge. Total sentence, 13 years. Gasps filled the courtroom. Naomi's eyes widened. Isaiah let out a long breath. Hollis's lawyer shot to his feet. "Your Honor, that's excessive." Judge Hayes cut him off. "What's excessive, counselor, is the number of times your client was allowed to get away with this behavior. What's excessive is the fact that Ms. Fletcher had to fight this hard just to be believed. What's excessive is a system that protects officers like your client instead of the people they're supposed to serve." She looked at Hollis one last time. "You will serve every day of this sentence, and when you get out, you will be barred from ever serving in law enforcement again." She banged her gavel. "We're adjourned." The courtroom erupted. People cheered. Naomi sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Isaiah pulled her into a hug, and she finally let herself cry. 13 years. It wasn't enough to undo what had happened, but it was justice. As Hollis was led out of the courtroom, he looked back one last time. His eyes found Naomi's, and for the first time she saw something other than arrogance in his face. She saw regret, but it was too late for regret. The damage was done, and now he would pay for it. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Naomi stood on the steps with Simone, Isaiah, Latoya, and Dr. Stein. Cameras flashed, microphones were shoved forward, and Naomi took a deep breath. Today, justice was served. Not just for me, but for every person who's been victimized by someone who was supposed to protect them. This verdict sends a message. No badge, no uniform, no position of power gives you the right to hurt people. She paused, looking directly into the cameras. I want to thank everyone who stood with me, my brother Isaiah, my colleague Latoya, Dr. Stein, my lawyer Simone Grant, and all the nurses and healthcare workers who supported me through this. Her voice strengthened. But this isn't over, because Officer Hollis wasn't the only bad cop. He was just the one who got caught. We need systemic change. We need accountability. We need a system that protects victims, not abusers. A reporter shouted, "What's next for you?" Naomi smiled faintly. I'm going back to work, because that's what I do. I'm a nurse, and I'm going to keep helping people, just like I was doing the night Officer Hollis decided I didn't matter. She turned and walked down the steps, surrounded by her supporters. Isaiah walked beside her, Latoya on her other side. As they reached the street, a young black woman approached. She was maybe 20, dressed in scrubs, her eyes full of tears. "Thank you," she said. "I'm a nursing student, and watching you stand up like this, it made me believe I can do it too." Naomi took her hands. "You can, and you will. Don't ever let anyone make you feel like you don't belong." The woman nodded, wiping her eyes. "I won't, I promise." As they walked away, Isaiah said quietly, "You changed something today. You know that, right?" Naomi looked at him. "We all did." That night, Naomi sat on her couch with a cup of tea, the news playing softly in the background. Every channel was covering the verdict. Social media was exploding with support. But Naomi wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about the young nursing student, about all the people who'd reached out to her over the past weeks, sharing their own stories of abuse, of being dismissed, of fighting to be heard. This case had started as one nurse standing up to one bad cop, but it had become something bigger, a movement, a reckoning. Her phone buzzed, a text from Dr. Stein. "Proud of you. See you tomorrow at shift change." Naomi smiled. Tomorrow she would go back to work, back to the ER, back to helping people, because that's who she was, not a victim, not a celebrity, not a symbol, a nurse, a sister, a fighter. And Officer Grant Hollis had learned the hard way that some people refuse to be broken. 6 months after the trial, life had settled into a new rhythm for Naomi Fletcher. She still worked at Mercy General, still took the night shifts, still treated every patient with the same care and dignity she'd shown Trevon Hughes that night. But things had changed. The hospital had implemented new protocols for police interactions. Officers were no longer allowed in patient care areas without checking in with security first. Staff received training on how to document and report incidents of abuse, and a liaison position was created specifically to handle conflicts between law enforcement and medical personnel. Naomi had been asked to help develop the training program. At first, she'd hesitated, but Isaiah had encouraged her. "You lived through it. You understand it better than anyone. Use that." So she did. Once a month, she stood in front of groups of nurses, doctors, and hospital staff telling her story, showing the video, explaining what to do if it happened to them. And every time, she ended with the same message. Your voice matters. Your safety matters. And you never, ever have to accept abuse from anyone, no matter what badge they wear. The civil lawsuit against the police department had settled for $2 million. Naomi had donated half of it to organizations that provided legal support for healthcare workers facing similar situations. The rest she'd put toward a scholarship fund for nursing students from underserved communities. When reporters asked her about the money, she'd said simply, "This was never about getting rich. It was about making change." Officer Kyle Bradford had been sentenced to 2 years probation and community service. He'd lost his job, his pension, and any chance of working in law enforcement again. But unlike Hollis, he'd taken responsibility. He now spoke at police academies about the cost of remaining silent when you witness misconduct. Naomi had never spoken to him directly. She wasn't sure she ever would, but she'd heard about his work, and part of her hoped he meant it. As for Officer Grant Hollis, he was serving his sentence at a state prison 2 hours outside Atlanta. He'd filed an appeal, claiming the sentence was excessive. It had been denied. Naomi didn't think about him much anymore. When she did, she felt no anger, no hatred, just a sad awareness that he'd thrown away his life because he couldn't control his ego. One evening, Naomi was finishing up her shift when a new patient came in. A young black man, maybe 19, with a gunshot wound to the shoulder. He was conscious, scared, and in pain. Naomi took his hand. "I've got you. You're going to be okay." He looked at her, tears streaming down his face. "I didn't do nothing. I was just walking home, and the cops and they—" "Shh," Naomi said gently. "Right now we focus on you. We'll deal with everything else later." As she worked on him, stabilizing his vitals, prepping him for surgery, she felt the weight of her own experience. She understood his fear, his sense of helplessness, the feeling that the people who were supposed to protect you had become the threat. After he was taken to surgery, Naomi sat in the break room, her head in her hands. Latoya found her there. "You okay?" Naomi looked up. "Sometimes I wonder if anything's really changed." Latoya sat beside her. "It has. Maybe not everywhere. Maybe not fast enough, but it has. And you're part of the reason why." Naomi managed a small smile. "We both are." That weekend, Naomi attended a community event organized by local activists. It was a forum on police reform, and she'd been asked to speak. She stood at the podium looking out at the crowd, young and old, black and white and brown, all of them there because they believed in something better. "I didn't set out to be an activist," she began. "I just wanted to do my job. But sometimes doing your job means standing up when standing up is dangerous. It means speaking truth when truth is uncomfortable. It means refusing to accept that this is just the way things are." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "Officer Hollis is in prison. That's justice. But real change doesn't happen in a courtroom. It happens in moments like this, when we come together and say, 'Enough,' when we demand accountability, when we refuse to be silenced." The crowd applauded. Naomi continued, "I'm just one person. I'm a nurse who got assaulted and decided to fight back. But there are thousands of people like me, people who've been hurt, dismissed, brutalized by the very system that's supposed to protect them, and every single one of those people deserves justice." She looked directly at the crowd. "So I'm asking you to stand with me. Not just for me, but for everyone who's been told they don't matter. Because we do matter. And together, we can create a world where no one has to fight this hard just to be treated with basic human dignity." The applause was thunderous. People stood, some were crying, and Naomi felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. After the event, a man approached her. He was white, middle-aged, wearing a police uniform. "Ms. Fletcher, I'm Sergeant Tom Lindsay. I just wanted to say I'm in the middle of implementing some of the changes you talked about at my precinct. Your story, it opened my eyes to things I should have seen a long time ago." Naomi studied him. "What kind of changes?" "Mandatory de-escalation training, body cameras that can't be turned off, and a civilian review board for all use of force incidents." "That's a start," Naomi said. "But the real work is cultural. It's about teaching officers that the people they serve aren't the enemy." Sergeant Lindsay nodded. "You're right, and that's the hardest part. But we're trying." Naomi extended her hand. "Then keep trying." He shook it, gratitude evident in his eyes. "Thank you." As he walked away, Isaiah appeared beside Naomi. "You handled that well," she sighed. "I don't know if one conversation changes anything. Maybe not, but 1,000 conversations might. And you're having them. That matters." 2 years after the trial, Naomi received an invitation. It was from the governor's office. She'd been selected to receive the state's Courage in Service Award for her advocacy work on behalf of healthcare workers. The ceremony was held at the Capitol. Naomi wore a simple black dress, her hair pulled back, her face calm. Isaiah sat in the front row, beaming. Latoya was there. Dr. Stein, Simone Grant, even Trevin Hughes, who'd become a friend. When Naomi's name was called, she walked to the stage. The governor, a black woman in her 50s, shook her hand. "Ms. Fletcher, your courage in the face of injustice has inspired countless people. You didn't just seek justice for yourself, You fought for systemic change, and because of you, healthcare workers across this state are safer. She handed Naomi a plaque. But more importantly, you reminded us all that one voice speaking truth can change the world. Naomi accepted the award, her throat tight with emotion. She stepped to the microphone. I accept this honor not for myself, but for every person who's been silenced. Every person who's been told their pain doesn't matter. Every person who's been victimized by someone in power. She looked out at the audience. What happened to me shouldn't have happened, but it did, and I made a choice. I could stay silent or I could fight. I chose to fight, not because I'm special, but because I refused to let one bad officer define my worth. Her voice grew stronger. We all have that choice. When we see injustice, we can look away or we can act. When we witness abuse, we can stay quiet or we can speak up. And when the system fails us, we can accept it or we can change it. She held up the plaque. This award is beautiful. But the real reward is knowing that because I stood up, maybe the next nurse won't have to. Maybe the next patient will be protected. Maybe the next Officer Hollis will think twice before abusing his power. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Naomi stood there, holding the plaque, tears streaming down her face. And in that moment, she realized something. She'd started this journey as a victim, but she'd become something else. A voice, a force, a reminder that justice wasn't given. It was fought for. And she wasn't done fighting. 3 years after that night in the ER, Naomi Fletcher stood at the nurses' station at Mercy General reviewing charts. It was a quiet Tuesday evening, the kind of shift where you could actually breathe between patients. A young nurse, fresh out of school, approached her nervously. Ms. Fletcher? I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say I saw your documentary. And it really meant a lot to me. Naomi looked up and smiled. Thank you, and please call me Naomi. The young woman, whose name tag read Jessica, shifted awkwardly. I'm going into my first solo shift next week, and I'm scared. Scared of making mistakes. Scared of dealing with difficult patients. And after seeing what happened to you, I'm scared of, I don't know, standing up for myself and it going wrong. Naomi put down her pen and gave Jessica her full attention. Being scared is normal, but don't let fear stop you from doing the right thing. If you see something wrong, say something. If someone crosses a line, draw a boundary. Your safety matters. Jessica nodded, still looking uncertain. But what if it happens again? What if someone like Officer Hollis walks in here and... Naomi interrupted gently. Then you do exactly what I did. You stay calm. You document everything. You call for backup. And you remember that your worth isn't determined by how someone treats you. It's determined by how you treat yourself and others. Jessica's eyes welled up. Thank you. I needed to hear that. As she walked away, LaToya appeared beside Naomi. Still mentoring the newbies, I see. Naomi shrugged. Someone has to. Besides, if my story helps even one person stand up for themselves, then everything I went through was worth it. LaToya leaned against the desk. You know the hospital board approved your proposal, right? The one about expanding the advocacy program? Naomi looked up sharply. Really? Really. Starting next month, every hospital in the network will have a dedicated patient and staff advocate, someone whose entire job is to handle situations like what happened to you. And guess who they want to head the training division? Naomi's eyes widened. They want me to leave bedside nursing? Not leave, expand. You'd still do shifts, but you'd also be developing policy, training staff, working with law enforcement, making sure what happened to you never happens to anyone else here. Naomi sat back in her chair, processing. That's a big change. It is, but you've already been doing the work. This just makes it official and pays you for it. Naomi smiled slowly. Let me think about it. But she already knew her answer. That night, when Naomi got home, Isaiah was waiting on her couch. He'd kept a key to her apartment, and she'd long since stopped being surprised when he showed up unannounced. We need to talk, he said. Naomi dropped her bag. About what? About you. About where you are. About where you're going. Naomi sat down across from him. Okay, talk. Isaiah leaned forward. 3 years ago, you went through hell, and you came out the other side stronger than anyone I've ever known. You got justice. You changed policies. You inspired people. You won. Naomi waited. I hear a but coming, but I want to make sure you're healing. Not just fighting, not just advocating, actually healing. Naomi was quiet for a moment. Then she said softly, some days are harder than others. Sometimes I walk into Bay 4 and I can still feel his hand on my wrist. Sometimes I see a police officer and my heart starts racing. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever feel completely safe again. Isaiah nodded. That's what I thought. Have you talked to anyone? A therapist? A counselor? Naomi looked away. I've been too busy. That's not an answer. That's an excuse. She met his eyes. I know. Isaiah's voice softened. Nay, you're my sister, and I'm so proud of everything you've done. But you can't pour from an empty cup. You've been giving and giving and giving. At some point, you need to let someone fill you back up. Naomi felt tears prick her eyes. I don't want to fall apart. Not after everything. You won't fall apart. You'll heal. There's a difference. That weekend, Naomi made an appointment with a therapist who specialized in trauma. It was one of the hardest things she'd ever done, harder even than testifying in court. But as she sat in that office, telling her story to someone who listened without judgment, she felt something shift inside her. A loosening. A release. The therapist, a black woman in her 40s named Dr. Renee Parker, listened carefully. Then she said, You've been carrying the weight of everyone's expectations, the hospitals, the communities, your own, and that's exhausting. Naomi nodded, tears streaming down her face. I just want to be normal again. I want to walk into work without looking over my shoulder. I want to see a police officer without my chest getting tight. I want to sleep through the night without dreaming about that wall. Dr. Parker handed her a tissue. Those are all reasonable things to want. And with time and work, you can get there. But first, you have to give yourself permission to not be okay, to not be the strong one all the time, to be human. Naomi wiped her eyes. I don't know if I remember how. Then we'll figure it out together. Over the next 6 months, Naomi attended weekly therapy sessions. She learned coping mechanisms for her anxiety. She worked through the trauma of that night. She grieved for the sense of safety she'd lost. And slowly, gradually, she began to heal. She accepted the position at the hospital. The advocacy program launched to widespread acclaim. Naomi split her time between bedside nursing and policy development, finding a balance that felt right. She also started dating again. A quiet, kind man named Jonathan who worked as a high school teacher. He knew her story but didn't define her by it. He made her laugh. He made her feel safe. And for the first time in years, Naomi allowed herself to imagine a future that wasn't shaped by trauma. On the 4th anniversary of the incident, a local news station asked to interview Naomi. She almost said no. She was tired of telling the story, tired of reliving it. But then she thought about Jessica, the young nurse, about all the people who'd reached out over the years, sharing how her story had given them courage. So she said yes. The interviewer, a professional woman in her 30s, asked the expected questions. How did it feel that night? What was the trial like? What's changed since then? But then she asked something new. If you could go back and change anything about that night, what would it be? Naomi was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I wouldn't change anything. The interviewer looked surprised. Really? Even knowing how much pain it caused? Naomi nodded. Because if it hadn't happened to me, it would have happened to someone else. Someone who might not have had the resources to fight back. Someone who might not have survived. And Officer Hollis would still be out there hurting people. She paused. Don't get me wrong. I wish it had never happened. I wish I'd never been assaulted. I wish I'd never had to stand in that courtroom and relive the worst night of my life. But since it did happen, I'm glad it was me. Because I was strong enough to fight, and that fight changed things. The interviewer's eyes were bright. What would you say to someone going through something similar right now? Naomi looked directly into the camera. I'd say this. You didn't deserve what happened to you. You're not weak for being hurt. You're not wrong for being angry. And you're not alone. Her voice grew stronger. Fighting back isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's just getting out of bed the next day. Sometimes it's telling one person the truth. Sometimes it's filing one report. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let them make you believe you don't matter. She took a breath. Because you do matter. Your story matters. Your pain matters. And if you decide to fight, there are people who will stand with you. I will stand with you. The interview aired that evening. Within hours, Naomi's phone was flooded with messages. From nurses, from victims of police violence, from people who'd been silenced and were finding their voices. And one message stood out. It was from a woman named Jasmine, a paramedic who'd been assaulted by an officer during a medical call. She'd never reported it, too afraid of retaliation. But after seeing Naomi's interview, she'd filed a formal complaint, and the investigation had just been opened. "Your story gave me courage," Jasmine wrote. "Thank you for fighting. Because of you, I'm fighting too." Naomi read the message 3 times. Then she showed it to Isaiah. "This is why you did it," he said quietly. "This right here." Naomi nodded, tears in her eyes. "This is why." 5 years after that night in the ER, Naomi stood in front of a packed auditorium at a national nursing conference. She'd been invited to give the keynote address. She looked out at the sea of faces, nurses of every age, race, and background, all of them there because they believed in the work, in helping people, in making a difference. Naomi stepped to the microphone. "5 years ago, I was assaulted while doing my job, and in the aftermath, I had a choice. I could let that moment define me, or I could define what that moment meant." She paused. "I chose to fight, not because I'm special, not because I'm fearless, but because I refused to let one man's violence silence me." Her voice filled the auditorium. "And what I learned is this: our power doesn't come from never being hurt. It comes from refusing to stay down when we are. It comes from speaking truth even when our voices shake. It comes from standing together when the system tries to divide us." She looked around the room. "Every single person in this room has the power to change lives. You do it every day when you hold a patient's hand, when you advocate for better care, when you refuse to accept less than what your patients deserve." Her voice grew passionate. "But that power extends beyond the bedside. It extends to the policies we demand, the systems we challenge, the injustices we refuse to tolerate. Because nursing isn't just a job, it's a calling. And that calling requires us to fight not just for our patients, but for each other." The room erupted in applause. Naomi felt the energy, the solidarity, the shared purpose. And she realized something. She'd started this journey alone, afraid and hurt. But she wasn't alone anymore. She was part of something bigger, a movement, a community, a force for change. After the speech, dozens of people lined up to talk to her, to thank her, to share their own stories. And Naomi listened to every single one, offering encouragement, resources, and solidarity. As the crowd finally thinned, a young black woman approached. She looked familiar, but Naomi couldn't place her. "Ms. Fletcher, I don't know if you remember me. I'm Jessica. I was the nursing student who talked to you a couple years ago. I was scared about my first solo shift." Naomi's face lit up. "Of course I remember. How are you?" Jessica smiled, her eyes bright. "I'm good, really good. I just got promoted to charge nurse, and last month I had to stand up to a doctor who was being abusive to one of my patients. And I did it because I remembered what you told me. My voice matters." Naomi felt her throat tighten. "I'm so proud of you. I wouldn't be here without you, without your story, without your courage." Naomi shook her head gently. "You were always courageous. I just reminded you of what was already there." As Jessica walked away, Isaiah appeared beside Naomi. He'd flown in to hear her speak. "You ready to go?" Naomi looked around the auditorium one last time, at the people still talking in small groups, at the connections being made, at the change being sparked. "Yeah, I'm ready." They walked out into the evening air. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, the sun setting over the city. Isaiah put his arm around his sister's shoulders. "You did good, Nai." Naomi leaned into him. "We did good." And as they walked, Naomi thought about that night 5 years ago. The fear, the pain, the injustice, but also the strength she'd found, the community that had rallied, the change that had happened. Officer Grant Hollis had tried to break her, but instead he'd forged something unbreakable, a voice, a movement, a reminder that justice wasn't just about one verdict or one sentence. It was about every person who refused to stay silent, every person who stood up when it was easier to sit down, every person who believed that the world could be better and fought to make it so. Naomi Fletcher had been a victim, but she'd refused to stay one. She'd become a survivor, an advocate, a leader, a voice for the voiceless. And her story, the story that had started with violence and fear, had become a story of courage, resilience, and hope. Because that's what happens when you refuse to be silenced. You don't just find your voice, you help others find theirs. And together, those voices can change the world.